Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the LlamaIndex webinar series. Today, we're excited to host CodeGPT, and Daniel, one of the lead authors, will be presenting this project. And so, it started off as a VS Code extension for just a code copilot, and I think it's since evolved into a general platform for AI systems and copilot generation. So I'm super excited to see just the UX of it all, how it really helps people become more efficient in their day-to-day productivity, whether it's coding or anything else. And especially with platforms like, the rise of Devin, with autonomous agents, there's been a lot of interest in how do you actually use these things to really automate away, and not just automate away, like make your own personal day-to-day lives more efficient. So I think Daniel will talk a little bit about the platform, potentially go into a short demo, as well as an overview of how it works, and then we'll do a Q&A session towards the end. So without further ado, passing it over to Daniel.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about CodeGPT, what we are working about, like more than 1 year working in this project. So let me introduce myself. My name is Daniel Ávila Arias. I'm computer engineer from Chile, but I'm living in Michigan for about 4 years. So English is not my first language, but I'm gonna try to explain everything. I'm gonna try to do my best. If you have any question, I can re-answer the question with more details and other words, but I'm gonna try to do my best. So what is CodeGPT? What is we are doing? So everything starts with a full extension for a free extension for Visual Studio Code. So you could connect your LLMs and you could start to write code with LLMs in Visual Studio Code with this extension. We have integration for a lot of providers right now. We have Microsoft, Google, Amazon Bedrock. We have the Anthropic integration too. So you could connect Cloud 3, GPT-4, and it's really exciting to start to grow code with LLM. So we are gonna try to explain everything that we are doing with this extension, and we have more features, but everything starts like that. So we have the extension right now, and also we have the marketplace, and we have the Docker with API. I'm gonna explain everything. I'm gonna try to explain everything in this session. And the extension is pretty simple to use. You have to go to the tab in Visual Studio Code. You have to go to the marketplace tab, and just have to install the extension that have more than 1 million downloads in Visual Studio Code. And when you install the extension, you have everything that you need to start to use LLMs inside of Visual Studio Code. So I'm gonna explain what we are doing with this extension. If you want to connect different kind of providers, you could choose your provider, and you have to connect your own account to use the free plan from the extension. So it's this part is totally free. You could connect your own account, and you're gonna be able to use your account with your tokens inside of Visual Studio Code. So this is pretty amazing. Right now in this video, I'm using Cloud 3, and you just have to select the code, and we are going to be able to get the full context that you are working. What language are you using? What libraries are you using in this file? And when you select the code, we have more context for send to the LLMs and get more information that you are doing inside of Visual Studio Code. So we have the vision too, so you could work with image. For example, here you could select any component from any web page. So in this example, I'm selecting a bar chart, and I'm using like a context inside of the chat in CodeGPT. And so you don't have to just write a code. You could use image to get more context for your work. And in this example, I'm just using an image and a couple letters, and I'm going to be able to get the full chart in Python. And I can run this script, and I'm going to be able to get the same component that I take the picture in the web page. And this is pretty amazing because you right now you could use image and text for coding. So you could use different kind of image. For example, here I'm just drawing some tables, and the CodeGPT is going to be able to know that you are using this kind of tables and you are writing. Here we could see that the models, they are pretty good using image and getting the full information from the just a drawing, and get the full script from SQL. So you could use that kind of features. This is another one. The name of this tool is React Sandbox. So if you are using React, we could build the full component from the same thing that I showed you. So for example, if you use this tool, you could get any component from any web page, and you are going to be able to use that component like a context. But the most amazing thing that you want to be able to watch what is happening. In this case, the CodeGPT is writing the full code, but you could see what is happening, and you could iterate. You could send a text to the model and change things in the component. So in this case, I'm changing the title to the black letters, and with one click, you're going to be able to have the full component in Visual Studio Code. So that's pretty amazing to start to write code with LLM. So in this case, I'm using Ollama. So if you want to totally privacy, if you don't want to pay for the LLMs, you could use Ollama inside of your computer, and you can run an LLM. In this case, I'm using, I think I'm pulling the V2 model from Microsoft. Let me check. Oops, sorry. Yes, I'm pulling V2. So you could download the models, start to run the model inside of your computer, and then you just have to write the name of the model, and you're going to be, CodeGPT is going to be able to connect with Ollama and start to use the full local model inside of Visual Studio Code. So you don't have to pay. You're going to be able to have everything private in your local computer. And this is pretty amazing because it's really fast. You could use these kind of models inside the Visual Studio Code, and it's gonna be totally free. And you could use like chat, or you could use like a autocomplete code. So if you want to use more kind of models, you could read this article. I wrote the full article to connect with Ollama, and you could create your own models inside of Ollama with a model file. I think is the name of the file. And then you could connect this model inside of Visual Studio Code and start to use it. How we are doing these kind of things? So we need to know the full structure of the code. So when you use this kind of model inside of Visual Studio Code, you have a lot of information from your code editor. So we are getting the full information from your project. We are getting the class, the function, the everything that you have in Visual Studio Code, and we are using that context to send that information to the LLM. So when you use the chat models, you just have to use that kind of model. But when you use the autocomplete models, you have to select different kind of models. So We are using completion models, with struct models, to get the full information, to pass the full information to the LLMs. And then we are using fill in the middle to autocomplete the information inside of the autocomplete mode. So, for example, in this case, we are reading the full information from this file, and we know what we have to autocomplete in this line. So you could use CodeGPT for autocomplete too, like GitHub Copilot. So this is happening inside of CodeGPT. This is the basic mode. So you could send the query, and we are going to be able to get the full context, the full code base, the code selected, and the package that you are using. And we send all this information to the LLMs with the prompt engineer, of course, and the LLM is able to get the correct answer. So the other feature that we have is that we are using experts agents to work with LLMs inside of CodeGPT. So you could select different kind of agents. In this case, we have a lot of agents in the platform. So you could use this agent expert in different kind of technologies, and you're going to be able to have more information because right now we have the information from Visual Studio Code, but what happens if you need information from an API of documentation from another web page or another libraries that you are using inside of your project. So we are using LlamaIndex for get that information. We are using RAG to get all the information from vector database and send that information to the LLMs. And that is not enough. So we are working with repos too. So when we work with documents or libraries, if we have examples or documentation that will work. For example, here in this example, I'm using the Stripe API. So you just have to select the expert agent, and you are going to be able to ask question about the Stripe API. So that's pretty amazing because you don't need to get the full context. You just have to select the agent, and you're going to be able to use that agent with that context, with that information, and you're going to be able to use that code from the Stripe documentation. What we are using with the repo, so that's I think the big challenge that we have in CodeGPT. We are working a lot with repos to get the full context from the code. So right now we build this CodeGPT code base index, and basically it's an extractor of information from your repo. So if you charge your repo in CodeGPT, we are using that that function that we build, and we are getting a lot of component from that repo. I'm going to explain that kind of thing that we are doing, but we are using this new function from LlamaIndex too. So we are testing what is better right now, but we have a lot of work in this kind of features. But for example, when we get information from a repo, we are building different kind of components. For example, here we have the class, the method, the function, and the files, and everything is connected. So we cannot use vector database with chunks to get the full information from a repo, because you could cut some function or some code, and the LLM is not going to be able to get the full context. So what we are doing here is we are scanning the full repo, and we are getting all these connections with class and functions, and we are sending this information to the LLMs. We are not using RAG, so we are just scanning the repo. And for example, this is LlamaIndex repo. we scan the full repo and we get this kind of graph. This is an example that we are using the LlamaIndex repo, and you could get the full answer from the repo. In this case, I'm asking how can I split, and our function is going to be able to get the full information. It's going to be able to send the text splitter, and you could start to use the text splitter context, and you're going to be able to have the full information from that function. And if you need examples, the CodeGPT is able to get the example from the repo and send you the example to get the context. So the other thing that we have, the other feature that we have is that we work inside of Visual Studio Code, but we know the full development work is not just in Visual Studio Code. So we have integration with Slack, with Discord, with GitHub, and you could use this expert agent or your agents inside of different kind of environments. So in this example, we are connecting the agents inside of Slack. So you could select your workspace in Slack, and you could connect this agent inside of your Slack environment. So for example, here we are selecting the agent, and you are going to be able to have the same question that you are using inside of Visual Studio Code, but in Slack with more people, with another environment, with another information. So the last thing that I'm gonna show you is that we have everything on premise. So if you want to use the full CodeGPT platform inside of your servers, you could get the full platform. We have a Docker with all this I just showed you, and you could install everything in your servers, and you could have the full integration of these tools inside of your data, with your privacy, with your security. And we have Python and JavaScript libraries to use too if you want to work with these experts. And that's all. I don't know if you have any question. Let me know.
Great, thanks so much for the presentation. I think we have a few questions in the chat, and then also, there's just some general Q&A questions I'd love to ask. Maybe just go through some of the questions in the chat first. One of the questions is, do you plan to support other IDEs as well besides VS Code?
Yeah. It's a little bit difficult. Try to work with a lot of IDE, but we are working with Microsoft right now. So we are working with Visual Studio Code, but we plan to get more IDEs in the future.
One of the questions is, in terms of retrieval, it's specifically about like re-ranking. Do you happen to know any like re-ranking capabilities that are specific to code-based data? Or maybe the more general question is, are there just like general things around retrieval you have to think about with respect to code-based data that are different than like standard retrieval over text?
Yeah, we are using re-ranking, but when we work with repos, it's a little bit difficult because you have different kind of function in different kind of level of your project. So when we work with documents, it's working, but it's different when you work with repos. So and that repo that I just showed you is a good repo. We have the docs tree, we have the good name of the function, we have the class, everything really good structured. But when you use another kind of repo that is not really good structured, everything explodes, everything is different. So yeah, I think for repo we are not using rack, so we need to change everything when you think in code. I think it's a challenge. We are just testing these things that just show you. So um, probably in a couple of weeks we are gonna have more details that we are doing in this kind of examples.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I was about to ask, and it's okay if you aren't able to share some of these things because you have some implementation under the hood and you're releasing some
Yeah.
stuff in a few. I guess maybe at a very high level, I know you mentioned you're not doing RAG for the repo, but given that like the repo can be very big, what are some like
Mhm.
general thoughts or intuitions that might be able to help guide some of the listeners here?
Yeah, the things that you could use RAG, but when you have documentation inside of the repo, you could use it. For example, in LlamaIndex repo, you have a lot of documentation. So you could have that kind of um, files, and when you read the full repo, you could select different kind of folders and files, and you could use RAG for that kind of folders, and it's gonna be really good. But when you have code, it's complicated. It's different. So that's changed everything.
One of the questions was basically, how do you make this like local secure in terms of like proprietary code? I think you basically answer that because you said that you have like private deployments. But if there's anything else you want to add, feel free to. I know you support like Ollama and you support like Docker deployments.
Yeah, exactly. So when you use the free extension, we are not using our servers to connect with the provider. So you could use the extension and you could connect your own API. So you could connect with your provider, and we are not a gateway in this kind of call. So but when you use our platform with our experts, yeah, that's happening in our servers. But that's happened with the big companies that we are working right now. For example, a bank that we are working right now, they cannot send that kind of information from that kind of information to our servers. So we have Docker. So you could use everything inside of your servers, and you could install everything that just show you, and you're gonna be totally privacy with your security, with your data, and everything is gonna be yours.
The next question, I'm actually pretty interested in the answer. In your mind, like, what is the best way to chunk and split code? I know you defined that graph of like the LlamaIndex code base as well as over like CodeGPT code base. What have you found
Yeah.
to be just effective in that regard?
Yeah, we are testing this kind of functionality right now. So we are not using an LLMs to get the. We are not using embedding. We are not using chunks. So I think this is the better things that you could use to get the full context of a repo, because you have classes, you have functions, you have the documentation, so you need to connect everything. And probably one class is gonna be connected to like 100 class. So one class is gonna be using like the same function in different kind of parts. So if you have the full connection, you could have the full node and the full way to get the full context. Um, it's different to explain this, but it's difficult to explain this. But I think this is the way that you could scan the full repo and get more information, and then you could use RAG from the documentation, and you're gonna be able to have a full context of the question of the user.
I think maybe just for listeners, I feel like when we think about RAG, it typically is in like a very traditional setting where you have like a lot of text and then you chunk it and then you put it into a vector database. But it seems like from here, just from code, you're not really modeling it in that type of pipeline like at all to start with. You're really just defining like some sort of abstract like syntax tree, right? And then for any documentation related things, you are splitting it up and chunking and doing some vectorization. But for code itself, you mentioned you like scan the entire repo, you just like define this overall graph. And I assume like there's some algorithm you're running on top of this graph to basically fetch like relevant information from the code base. And whether or not that's like vector search, like you could be using like knowledge graphs, you could be like doing some sort of like keyword entity lookup and then traversing the connections and the links. I think these are all possible. So I think maybe, you know, I'm sure like not all the details are public yet, but like generally speaking, I feel like the like maybe for code specifically, like some of the existing RAG principles just don't completely apply.
Yeah, exactly.
What are so I have a question. Like you mentioned you have like a chat UX and then you have like this autocomplete UX. What are some of the general UXs you're thinking about in terms of like how to best assist the user? And which of these UXs is the most popular among your users?
Yeah, the I don't use a lot of the autocomplete in my project, so I use a lot of the chat UX. I think it's easier to use that kind of UX. It's ChatGPT, so everyone could use it. I think right now the next step is the agents or the LLMs could read your code, and then they can send you notification from something happening in your code, and you don't have to start the conversation. If you have this kind of features in the future, you're going to be able to have notification from one agent, and you don't have to start reading everything every time. I think when you have that kind of um, notifications, you could have more how do I say that, more independent from your project. I don't know if I saying these kind of things correctly, but I'm trying to say if you don't need to start a chat and start an ask a question with your code, and you don't have to send the information first, it's gonna be easy for you because you just have to wait for that notification from the LLMs. Um, I think I explained if you can understand that. I don't know
Yeah,
if
no, I
you
mean,
can.
I did want to ask your thoughts about like just overall directions for agents as well as like how you think these
That's
UXs will evolve.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but actually right before that, in terms of just like the chat-based UX, the one question I want to ask is like when you first look at it, it looks very much like the ChatGPT interface. What are your like maybe at a very high level, like how do you explain to users like what this is doing, say beyond just like a raw LLM call? Because you know, from one way of looking at it, it could just you people might just, think, oh, this is just calling like ChatGPT or something and getting back an answer, and then you're just like copying and pasting the code into VS Code. Is that how that generally works, or are you also doing like context augmentation, inserting like the repo context into that like ChatGPT interface as well?
Yeah, we are getting more context. Let me show you. I'm gonna show you the extension pretty quick. Can you see the extension now?
Yep.
Okay. So for example, here we have the extension over here. So you could select different kind of models. So right now we have this UX. So if you want to use the marketplace with more expert, you could go to this way and you could select one of these experts. So right now we are trying to get this kind of context or this kind of agents more easy to the user, so they can start with one of these experts. So if you are working with TypeScript, for example, you could start with that kind of agent. So in ChatGPT, you have to send the full context. So you have to write. I'm working with TypeScript. You have to act like a really good programmer with TypeScript, and you have to write that kind of prompt. So right here we have the expert with the full context, with the full documentation. So you can start working with with this kind of expert in your project, and you don't need to uh, select or write that kind of prompt to start to work with. So I don't know if you start everything from one just one prompt, it's going to be difficult for the user. And we have a lot of new programmers that they are start to work with LLMs, and they don't know how to write the correct prompt for a start, asking question to the LLM. So we could do this kind of things, and they can start working with one agent or with one expert.
Right. Are you also injecting the context from the repo into the chat interface, or is that mostly for the autocomplete functionality?
Yeah, from the repo too.
I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha. In terms of UXs like beyond, I'm actually kind of curious to get your thoughts. Like, so you have a current like chat interface, and you also have like an autocomplete interface. What are ways that you're thinking about extending like CodeGPT, especially if we look at it like 3 to 6 months from now, and also a year into the future? What are some like overall interfaces that you want to evolve in this into?
Yeah, the other feature that we are working on is that you could run your code and you could get the full context that what happened with your code. So for example, if you are running a Python code, we could run your code, we can get the what happened, and we could get the context of the console. So we could iterate in that kind of features, in that kind of functionality, and we are gonna have more context from what happened if the code have bugs. So we could fix it. So we are thinking in something like that. We are working in something like that right now, and we have a lot of new features that we are thinking is you could do a lot of things with this technology, and inside of Visual Studio Code you have a lot of context, so you could just use it for get your GitHub repo, for get a new commit, for example. I know GitHub Copilots have a lot of feature too that they are working on, but I think we are we are different because we are using a lot of models. So if a new model is in the market, you could just change the model inside of CodeGPT and you could start to use it. So I don't know. I think we're gonna be able to publish more features in the future, but we have a couple in mind.
I think one of the comments actually is basically there's some potentially interesting features beyond just like autocomplete. Like you could have, well, you said you were mentioning, or you mentioned like being able to execute code, but also having like some sort of bash mode where you can, execute like CLI commands, maybe
Yeah.
run like Git commands too, and then basically integrate with your overall like Git versioning, like GitHub management, right? In addition to
Mhm.
just like the raw code itself.
Yeah, we are working in more integration because we know that the LLMs, they can write a really good code, but we could use it in the full um software developer environment. So we could connect with Slack, we could connect with Trello, with Jira, with another tools that we use to develop our software. So we are thinking in a lot of integration too.
Last week, I think one thing that got very popular was Devin, which I'm sure you know is like the autonomous agent that can go off and do things, and maybe takes a while to do it for like 10 to 20 minutes, but then it comes back and is able to just build like a full stack web application for you. I'm curious to get your thoughts on like whether this is like a direction that you would want to evolve CodeGPT to, or are you thinking about like a fundamentally like different UX where the human is maybe interacting with the code a little bit more?
Yeah, I think Devin is pretty amazing. So what we are trying to do is like the connection from the basic software development right now. So we are trying to connect this kind of right now we have one way to develop a software. So we are trying to connect this kind of way to this new way with LLM. So I think Devin is doing something amazing with the full control of everything, but I think the devs need more control of what is happening in your work. So if you need to know what the LLM is gonna do with this kind of code, or if the LLM is gonna write a different kind of code, you need more control. So in this way, we are trying to to we are trying to I don't know. It's different. I think it's a different tools. We are using the LLMs to write code. We are using LLMs to get more context from your project. If you have more context, more information from expert, more information from APIs, you're gonna be able to write code faster and better. But you need more control. I think if you have the full control of your project, you're gonna be able to write the full project by yourself.
Yeah. One thing to maybe not full autonomous agents, but one thing to make it like automate a little bit more of the workflows is to kind of add like pockets where some agent is able to do certain parts of a developer workflow. I think this is a comment in the chat as well, which is like one thing you could help automate, for instance, is like unit testing and code testing. So that, given some piece of code, it's an interesting exercise to think about, how do I just generate like a bunch of unit tests and put it in the right folder? And then, kind of go back into trying to run over these unit tests, having like understanding where it's failing. And then even like suggesting to the user to start with, like, this is where the code or original code might be failing, and here's how you could potentially fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not working in that right now, but probably in the future we're gonna have more integration like that. But yeah, it's very interesting that you could do with this kind of technology.
And maybe a general question is, so you support a lot of different LLMs. Like, what LLMs have you noticed to be the best at code?
Oof, really good question. I think GPT-4 is the best LLMs that I always use GPT-4 for code. Right now, Cloud 3 is pretty good, but I think for different kind of context. But what another one is that's really good is DeepSeek Coder. I'm using that model with Ollama in my local machine, and it's really fast and really good. And CodeLlama too is really good. I think that's for LLMs that they are really good with coding.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from like a developer perspective. Do you see a lot of developers like picking between LLMs, or do they mostly stick with like GPT-4 as a default?
Yeah, I'm doing that. So I'm changing from GPT-4 to Cloud 3 every time that I don't have the correct answer. So I think in the future, developers is gonna try to different LLMs, but I think when you have the correct context and the full information that you could have from your project, the LLMs is not important. If you have a really good context, you're gonna have a really good answer. So I'm using GPT 3.5 from for for
Mm.
some task. So if you have good context, you could use whatever you want right now because all LLMs they're really good.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think maybe there's some general thoughts, and then before we conclude, I think it's interesting. I do think like a lot of developers these days, honestly, are just straight up just copying and pasting code into ChatGPT, or I've just been copying and pasting code into Gemini Pro or Claude because you can just drop entire folders into Gemini, I think, and then you can also just
Mhm.
upload like some code files with like the 200K context window that Cloud 3 gives you. And then just asking questions and getting back code and you just copy and paste back into your editor. And so at a very, very basic level of things like CodeGPT, at least everything's kind of integrated in VS Code. So that friction time between like trying to copy and paste code is way shorter. But because it's more integrated, you can, and you have that chat interface, and assuming you are actually pulling context from the repo, you might have, you can maybe reduce the time it actually takes for users to just like upload full context into that UI interface because it's pre-baked in. And so you can just use that to basically answer questions, right, over like any amount of data in your repo. And I do think like a lot of people are still using chat to help them with development. And this could potentially, by being more integrated with their development environment, be more efficient.
Yeah. Right now, we are thinking to use that kind of big window context because we have more windows to use that kind of code. But the thing is, when you have the full repo, it's different because you have a lot of files and folders. You have a lot of information in different source. So yeah, you're gonna need RAG or that kind of retrieval information to work with the full context of software development project. So
Yeah,
yeah.
like you could still do retrieval, I think, but it's interesting. I think with long context models, you could probably do retrieval, but just like on the level of files. So you just dump like entire files into the context window. So like given any sort of question, just like fetch like the top like 5 to 10 most relevant files and just like stuff everything into the context window and see what the response is. Of
Mm.
course, that's going to cost you a lot more money, but maybe as these models get cheaper in the future, this becomes more feasible.
Yeah, or probably free.
Yeah. Great. Okay. I think that's basically most of the questions so far. And then we can conclude the webinar. Yeah, for everyone in the audience, thanks so much for joining. And then just Daniel, any last things you want to call out before we conclude?
You could use CodeGPT for free, so you could start to use that tool if you want. So you could use with Ollama too. So if you want totally privacy and your code and create your own copilot, you could use it. And no, thank you so much for this invitation. Thank you so much for having me here. And that's all.
All right. Thank you, Daniel, and thanks everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.